Hey guys, it's Zach or Zencha from Zenchamusic.com, and today we're going to talk about starting. As always, I've got my ritual juice or my tea. Today I'm drinking a Sencha for Zencha, and it's delicious. Today we're going to discuss why starting something is so freaking hard to do and some techniques to actually start. First, let's talk about Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law from Wikipedia reads, "Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion." So what does this have to do for producing music? Practically what this says is, unless you have a deadline, you're not going to get something done. If you have dreams to make an album and you don't have concrete limits as to when it needs to be finished, you will have difficulty getting it done, because you technically have an infinite amount of time to get it done. So Parkinson's Law says it'll take you an infinite amount of time. This is why it's so easy to get a homework assignment done in time. I mean, if you actually do them. Or stuff at, say, your day job, because you have clear deadlines and clear consequences if these things don't happen. As far as school goes, your grade drops. At a real job, you don't get paid. And that's a pretty, I'm at work right now, aren't I? So for most musicians, this means unless your music is your job, you're going to have a difficult time forcing yourself to finish things unless you're incredibly motivated, which is, as I'm aware, a very small portion of us. The second thing in regards to starting a song is choice. It's known psychological human behavior that when presented with a myriad of choices, we actually have a difficult time picking something. Practically, what this means is that when you're presented with a blank canvas or a blank sequencer, in our case, it's a very daunting situation. Technically, you have an infinite number of choices. There's a term called analysis paralysis, which is basically when you have too many choices, you spend too much time analyzing them, and you just can't pick one, you can't move forward. It's paralyzing. Obviously, there's a lot of potential in a blank canvas, as I've written about previously, but that says nothing for how difficult the execution of it actually is. The third thing stopping us from starting is mental difficulties. This is kind of a broad generalization, but basically anything that requires inner strength, inner will, inner motivation to start it falls under this category. It's such as willpower, like actually sitting down in front of your computer and working on music, opening up Reason or Logic or whatever your DAW is, and putting that first note down on the canvas. I'll oftentimes come home with the intentions of starting music, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get dinner, and then I'll start after, so I go get dinner. I come back and I'm like, oh man, I hop on League of Legends to see if any of my friends are on, and I think if there's nobody on, I'm not gonna play. 3 hours later, I've got 5 games under my belt, and go to sleep, nothing's done. So now that we've identified the problems of starting, what are some solutions? There's 4 things I want to talk about: chunking, time boxing, my favorite loops, and the McDonald's theory. So the idea of chunking is taking a somewhat nebulous idea and basically outlining it into chunks. If your goal is to make a video on how to start, it can be daunting to just think, oh, I need to make 5 minutes of talking about how to start. The best strategy would be to literally outline it. Here's my outline. Chicken scratch on the wall. That's my outline, y'all. Chunking things is by far one of the easiest ways for me to take the first step in finishing something. I'm really bad at starting a project when I'm kind of not clear on what exactly the first step is. I'm really hesitant to make that and attempt to go over the finish line if I don't know where the starting point is. As far as music production goes, chunking probably won't help you too much when you're actually in your DAW working on a song. I could say you could take a piece of paper and chunk the arrangement. Say I'm gonna go intro, verse, chorus, blah, 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 all the way down. But while that's an excellent exercise, most of the time you're just probably not gonna do that. Chunking is most effective when you're working on projects, like the meta of the music. If you're working on an album or a collaboration, saying to yourself, I'm gonna make an 8-song EP, it's kind of a bad way to approach it, because it sets this very large, nebulous goal in front of you. A smarter idea would be to say, I'm gonna write a song. When you finish that one, you come back and say, I'm gonna write another song. This is essentially chunking, because you're taking it step by step, rather than by one nebulous idea that's hard to mentally grasp and act on. The second one I got for you is called time boxing. Imagine your activity as a boxing ring. So for us, it'd be sitting down in front of the computer in the boxing ring, and you have to box with it, spar with it for a set period of time. For example, you say, I'm gonna time box for 5 minutes while making a song. So what you do is you sit down And after 5 minutes, if you no longer want to do it, you just walk away. The reason this works is that it's kind of similar to chunking in that it takes what you would normally think of as time spent making music and labels it as 5 minutes. It slaps this chunkable label on it and you sit down and you do it because, I mean, who can't sit down for 5 minutes and try doing something, especially if you're giving yourself the option to walk away. But what tends to happen, and you'll see if you try it, is that if you sit down for 5 minutes, you'll see that, especially if you come up with something cool, you're going to want to sit there and work on it longer. So the whole purpose of time boxing is just to get you to sit down and approach it in a manageable way. The third strategy is called the McDonald's theory. Imagine you were sitting around with a group of friends trying to decide where to eat. People are kind of like, I don't know. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do I want to do? What does she want to do? What does he want to do? And nobody's coming up with an idea. But what if you suggested McDonald's? What would happen? You see, it's like human nature to not want to go to McDonald's for lunch. As soon as you mention McDonald's, I bet you money somebody will stand up, potentially literally stand up, and suggest something most likely better than McDonald's for lunch. What you've done by suggesting McDonald's for lunch is you've provided context. You've provided the first step from which other suggestions can spawn from. Practically speaking, in music production, this means laying out an idea, even if it's not the greatest thing you can think of. Have you ever walked in on a friend who's also producing some music and you hear their song and you think, oh, I would change this, 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 and this, and this, I'd write that, I'd take that out. It's like the ability to work on the project is so much easier when it's there. That's because it is. So the idea with this theory is that you put something there and work from that point. Get away from a blank canvas as soon as possible. Suggest McDonald's. The fourth one, which is kind of similar to the McDonald's theory, is loops. For me, a good loop is a song. When you hear a good loop, a really powerful loop, one that really strikes you, you can almost instantly imagine where you want to take it. Working from that context is so easy. It's like breathing, it's second nature. At the beginning of this year, I actually stumbled upon Reason's stock loop library, and as a result of finding all those gems, because they've got some good stuff in there, I actually wrote one song a day for 9 days. Each time I was just cycling through the loops, and one would strike me, and it'd have a tone, a mood, a setting, a place, a world spring out at me, and all I had to do was put it in the DAW and just lay out the rest. All right, guys, I'm Zach, or Zencha, from Zenchamusic.com. I hope you got something cool out of this, and I will see you next time. I kind of want McDonald's now.